Hi everybody, welcome to class. Today we're talking about international regimes. This is actually my second take on this because I started the first one thinking I need to explain the prisoner's dilemma. No, that's what the internet is for. Hopefully you've seen a YouTube video now on what the prisoner's dilemma is, how it's explained a little bit better than I could actually explain it on a video like this. And we're going to go from there. So what we're talking about today again is this idea of anarchy. So I have a situation in which there is no higher authority, like the international sphere. How do you get cooperation out of that? And another way to think about this is, those of you who have roommates, there isn't a higher authority, meaning there's nobody in your room who's like the superior, who then makes laws and passes them and has police that enforce them, things like that. I know there's an RA and there are some rules on the hall and things like that, but even in an apartment building, right? Your roommates and you have to figure out how to get things done together. So even though there isn't a higher authority, there is cooperation. That's what we want to talk about today, how that actually works out. So one of the ways to think about this, ignore all the red lines I have on here. I went crazy last time and realized how bad I am at this. So again, YouTube, thank you very much, YouTube. The point here is, here's your prisoner's dilemma, and I know so far we haven't really talked that much about how this is international, but again, I hope you can see how the prisoner's dilemma, these two entities who are trying to cooperate or cheat on each other, there are tons and tons and tons of applications at the international level. So if you'll just hang with me, we're going to get there. All right? So let's keep moving, because that last slide, that made me nervous. All right. Here we go. So realism is going to say, look, realism is all about power. And we know this because we've talked about this over and over again, that the way realism sees anarchy, if there isn't this higher authority, then it's self-help. It's every state for themselves. And you're going to do whatever you can to get by, to win, to adjust. Liberalism is going to say, yes, that's absolutely true. But what self-help is going to tell the liberal is not sort of to take advantage of others, but self-help is going to tell the liberal that the best way that I can get by, the best way that I can help myself, is by cooperating with others who also think the best way is to help themselves. So if we cooperate together, that's going to be the way that we achieve that. So yes, anarchy leads to self-help, but the liberal says self-help leads to cooperation. Great. But what we've seen in the Prisoner's Dilemma game, despite that video you saw about the golden balls, is it actually turns out that the Prisoner's Dilemma game is a good example of, here you have these two rational actors, player A, player B, two prisoners, two states, whatever you want it to be. And even though using their rationality, if they cooperated, they would be better off, but each has an incentive to cheat, which means that they don't. Using their rationality, they end up more likely cheating, and there isn't cooperation. So one way we talk about this is we talk about the Nash equilibrium. And this is sort of the quote-unquote, if we're talking about in terms of game theory, this is the solution to the prisoner's dilemma game. Now, I don't mean that it's a solution like it solves how we cooperate, but it tries to explain why would two rational actors end up in a worse situation when cooperating would be better. So the Nash equilibrium is essentially the box. If we go back here, so each of these are states of the world. So in this state of the world, player B cooperates and player A defects. In this one, player B defects, player A defects. Okay, so those are the states of the world. We have 4 states of the world in this. And what the Nash equilibrium is, no one has an incentive on their own to change their decision and change the state of the world. Like, I may be better off if we both cooperate, but I can't decide for you that you're going to cooperate. So given what I think you're going to say or what I know you're going to say, I have to make a decision based on that. I can't make the decision for you. And that's true of the other player as well, which is why if I could make the decision for you, then maybe the best thing would be to cooperation. But even better than that is I get all the benefits and you get none of them. Rather than us sharing the benefits, I'd really rather have all the benefits. So both would be better off in that prisoner's dilemma with NCNC. Again, don't look at that last one. Look at the piece of paper I gave you, or the handout I gave you that's under number 1, the Prisoner's Dilemma game. Let me just get that up here so I make sure I know the exact words I use. Please hold 1 second. What did I say NC meant? Not confess. Good. No confession. So no confession, no confession. Remember, they cooperate and they end up with less time in jail each. I really think I messed that last thing up. All right. But the Nash equilibrium is CC, confess, confess. Right? Now, here's the deal. Why is that the Nash equilibrium? If we go, so look at your piece of paper, look at your Prisoner's Dilemma, the number 1 on their list of things to do here. Let's say that we both choose not to cooperate. We're in 1-1 on our piece of paper there. So we both choose not to cooperate. Now here's the problem. Here's the inherent problem of the whole thing. Let me see if I can get this right. Okay, so here's where we're at. But now here's the deal. I might then just go to the police after we've reached this point and I say, you know what? I'd rather not go to jail for a year, so I'm going to confess. And so now I'm not going to jail for a year, and the other guy's going to jail for 5 years. But the other guy has the same incentive to do the same thing, to turn on me. And what's going to happen is there becomes this sort of pressure to turn on the other person first. And what we end up with is we end up here. And this is what we call the Nash equilibrium. The reason we call this one the Nash equilibrium is because neither player has an incentive to change their mind on their own. If the other guy isn't going to budge, if that's where the other guy's going to be, then it would be dumb for me not to confess. I'll just end up in jail for more time for no good reason. So why isn't no confess and Nash equilibrium? Because we both have an incentive to change our decision. And on this one, we don't. Does this mean the realists are right? Does this mean that if you have individuals or states acting rationally in an anarchic environment, the result is going to be no cooperation? It's just, you can't trust anybody. You can only trust yourself. While that's not great, it would be probably better if we could cooperate. Because I can't trust you, I won't cooperate with you. And so there you end up with sort of the outcome. Before we talk about how to sort of work through this, I want to give you a couple IR examples of the Prisoner's Dilemma. Just two real obvious, not maybe obvious isn't the right word, two that come up a lot. One is arms control, or even the security dilemma. We've talked about this before. So take your piece of paper, I don't know why I keep calling it a piece of paper, but number 1, the Prisoner's Dilemma game, the thing that we have here on Canvas. And then where it says NC, think reduce arms. Okay, so, you know, A might be the US and B might be the Soviet Union. And NC means reduce your arms or your missiles or whatever. And C means to keep your missiles or to increase your missiles or arms. We have the same thing. Both countries would be better off if they could both choose to limit the amount of money they spend on military equipment. Because the only reason I'm building more military equipment is because you're building more military equipment. So we could both save money if neither one of us built this stuff. But what's even better for me is if you stop building the stuff and I build more stuff, and that way I overtake you in terms of military stuff. So the self-interest here is security, and this is a prisoner's dilemma, that even though both the United States and the Soviet Union, or both India and Pakistan, would be better off if they controlled or reduced their arms together, cooperated on that, the end result is more often an arms race. And this is what we call the security dilemma. Another example of this is carbon emissions. It comes up in environmental stuff a lot. So again, taking our example here, let's again think A is the United States and B is China, and NC would be reduced carbon emissions. So again, we're both better off if we both reduce our carbon emissions, but everybody has an incentive to cheat, to maintain or increase those carbon emissions. So if I'm the United States and I know China's going to keep theirs low, right? Cooperation would mean we both keep them low. But I don't know they're going to keep them low, so I raise mine and they raise theirs and blah, blah, blah. And the result is, what we want, we both want economic growth. And so that pushes us into this potential of the Nash equilibrium being, instead of it being both of us reduce our carbon emissions, we both are actively keeping or increasing our carbon emissions. I hope that makes sense. This is one of those things where I can't really tell on video if that's making sense. I have another example I want you guys to read about, then we'll come back and we'll talk about how do you actually get to cooperation then, because I'm leaving it pretty bleak right now. That states just can't do it. Acting rationally. It's not an irrational thing at all. They just can't get to cooperation, and then we're screwed. So how do we get to cooperation? So that's what we're going to get to next. But first you're going to read about the vaccines.